Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. There will be no fancy intro today because I have to get through this extremely quickly. However, for today we do have an enhanced risk that extends across the eastern central plains into the midwestern regions for western Iowa, western Missouri, western Arkansas, northeastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, and eastern Nebraska there. Risks for today do include a 10% tornado risk for two separate locations, down into northeastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas, southwestern Missouri, as well as Iowa, northwestern Missouri, northeastern Kansas, and eastern Nebraska, where we could see the potential for a couple tornadoes, potentially a few tornadoes, some of which could definitely be strong. We definitely have the potential for an outbreak on our hands, and I'm honestly kind of surprised that they didn't upgrade to a 15% tornado risk for today with our newest outlook that you'll see probably in the middle of this video that's going to come out. But we definitely have a little bit of uncertainty, but it is definitely clearing away, especially as of now. I'm honestly kind of surprised they didn't upgrade the tornado risk at least a little bit. However, for our damaging wind risk for today, we do have a 15% damaging wind risk, where we could see the potential of some scattered damaging wind gusts, as well as a 30% hail risk with the potential of some massive hailstones across this region. For tomorrow, we do have a fairly broad enhanced risk for southern Iowa, western Missouri, Kansas, southeastern Nebraska, central Oklahoma to north central Texas there. Risks for tomorrow do include a very broad 10% tornado risk for the enhanced risk region, where we could see the potential for a few tornadoes, some of which could definitely be strong. A 30% damaging wind risk, where we could see the potential for widespread damaging wind gusts, as well as a 30% hail risk, where we could see the potential of some widespread hail that could definitely be very large. For our day 3 outlook, we do have a 15% or a slight risk for the Midwest back into the central plains for northeastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, southern Iowa, western Missouri, western Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, and northwestern Louisiana there, where we could be watching for the potential of some severe thunderstorms upcoming. And then for day 4, day 8 outlook, we currently don't have anything issued. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast for today, we do have a slight risk for Missouri, Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, northeastern Texas, where we could be watching the potential of some scattered flash flooding. For tomorrow, we do have a moderate risk for the central plains for Oklahoma, north central Texas, southeastern Kansas, southwestern Missouri, and northwestern Arkansas there, where we could see the potential of some widespread flash flooding, some of which could definitely be some significant in some areas. For our winter weather outlooks for today, we do have the potential for some pretty heavy snowfall in elevated portions of the Rockies. Same for tomorrow, and same with our day 3 outlook. And then for a day 3 outlook for excessive rainfall forecast, which I did miss, we do have a slight risk for southern Missouri, Arkansas, eastern Colorado, or eastern Oklahoma, and eastern Texas, as well as northwestern Louisiana there, where we could see the potential of some scattered flash flooding. Taking a look at our weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars as well as our surface observation, how those are going to work in conjunction with our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. As of right now, starting off with our 500 millibars in our upper level jet here, we do have a pretty powerful shortwave trough that is currently advecting into the central plains here, with very, very prominent spreading of our isobars here. So we are definitely seeing a very large, widespread lift across this region. We will also see a very large amount of directional shear up in that region due to it being in such close proximity to our low pressure system there. And we will look at our directional shear later. But as far as our 200 millibar jet goes, we are going to see some pretty strong 500 millibar flow, upwards of 80 miles per hour, which will definitely supply the region with some really strong speed share, and definitely supportive of a hail risk, as well as support the overall risk for severe thunderstorms in general. We also do have a embedded shortwave here that will act as a mini engine to really get those storms going. And then for our surface observations, what's going to be triggering them, we are expected to see the surface low kind of push off to the northeast here slowly, with a warm front that is currently ahead of this. I don't know why our warm front looks like this. And then we also have a cold front that is trailing behind it. And right in that warm sector there is going to be the biggest tornado risk. And then along the cold front, we could also see the potential for some strong tornadoes further down to the south in eastern Oklahoma and northeastern Texas there. You can already tell that this is an ongoing risk with multiple tornado warnings already along this region. And this is just getting started too as well, so it could definitely be crazy later on. Taking a look at our low-level jet at our 700 millibars and how that will affect our tornado risk across this region and our directional shear, we are expected to see a pretty strong low-level jet across this region in association with that very powerful 500 millibar shortwave there, with 700 millibar flow that could be able to get upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour across this region. That is going to definitely support some really strong directional shear across this area and be very supportive of a tornado risk later on this afternoon as well as right now. And then further down to the south, we are expected to continue to see that same strong low-level jet, maybe a little bit more spotty in some regions, but we could definitely still see some strong 700 millibar flow, upwards of 40 to 50 miles per hour. May increase a little bit in some smaller pockets, but it will definitely be very strong, very supportive of some strong directional shear and support the potential for tornadoes, some of which could definitely be strong further down to the south as well. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how that will affect our overall risk for severe thunderstorms with our spreading of our wind vectors as well as our speed share for our hail risk, we are expected to see some pretty moderate to weak 200 millibar flow across this region. However, we do have some extremely strong 500 millibar flow, which will definitely be supportive of a hail risk and some pretty strong directional speed share across this region, even if we don't have a really strong 200 millibar jet. However, as far as the spreading of our wind vectors here, we have very prominent spreading of our wind vectors, and that is going to heavily encourage severe thunderstorm development, as we will have a lot of lift across this region as a result of that really strong spreading of those isobars aloft. Taking a look at our storm relative velocity and how that will affect our tornado risk across this region. Again, we do have a really strong low-level jet, so we are bound to see some really strong directional shear across this region. With storm relative velocity values in the north here, that could potentially get upwards of 300. It may even be able to increase to potentially 400 in some regions later on this afternoon as storms track towards the second half of the enhanced risk region. And then we will continue to see some really strong directional shear further down to the south as well, anywhere from 400 to 300 values of storm relative velocity. Same with further down to the south, where we may have potentially a little bit more on the lower end because we do have a little bit more rocky low-level jet, but we could definitely see some pretty strong directional shear backing our storms as well, and as well as within our area where storms are ongoing, or ongoing on models at least, definitely have some smaller pockets of strong storm relative velocity, but that's likely associated with convection and rotating storms that are being picked up by our ARRR models. But regardless, we are still going to see some really strong directional shear and probably even a lot more surface vorticity as a result of the fact that we are going to see backed winds further off to the west, potentially in our lowest levels, due to it having to circle back around the northern or northeastern side of that surface low. And with 200 millibar flow, that is going to be almost completely opposite to it if it's moving off to the west here. That's going to make for a very large amount of surface vorticity, especially with winds out of the south on the southern side of our warm front, and winds into the west on the northern side of our warm front. We will see a very large amount of surface vorticity, and if we have any sort of 0 to 3 kilometer instability across this region, which we will look at, these supercells could definitely become tornado printers. Taking a look at our bulk shear for our hail risk across this region, we are expected to see some pretty strong bulk shear values across this region. They're going to be fairly indicative of the potential for some massive hailstones, with bulk shear values upwards of 50 knots to potentially some 60 and 40 knots across this region. It's definitely going to be pretty indicative of the potential for some large hail across this region. This will be ahead of storms. We won't really have that much shear backing our storms. It may decrease to around the teens to the 20s backing our storms, but ahead of our storms, we will definitely still see some pretty strong 500 or some pretty strong directional shear as a result of that really strong 500 millibar flow aloft. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity so we can go over some general radar analysis as well as some timing. We will go over our radar analysis first. Hopefully I don't forget to do timing again like the last couple of times. But as far as our radar analysis goes, further up to the north, we are expected to see some semi-discrete development. It may form into more of an MCS-like feature, but still, these are definitely going to be pretty decently good at producing tornadoes, and we could definitely see multiple spin-ups along this line. These could be more discrete. They could definitely be more discrete. Our geometry of our trough definitely supports that. Maybe not more so towards the north. We could definitely see this trend into more of a semi-discrete mode, into more of a linear mode. However, further down to the south, we could see additional additional development along the dry line with some more discrete mode, more discrete supercells along that dry line, which is going to be abominably more available to produce the potential for tornadoes. Whenever you have discrete mode compared to a messy mode or a linear mode, that tornado potential goes from like 50 to like a bajillion. The discrete mode is extremely good at producing tornadoes if the ingredients are in place, which they definitely are. We definitely have not crazy strong ingredients. We do have some really good directional shear, and we will look at our instability, but we could definitely see the potential for tornadoes, and potentially multiple tornadoes across this region. And that's why I honestly think that the species probably should have issued maybe a 15% tornado risk across this region, even with a strong low-level jet that we have, even with more on the lower end, more moderate storm felicity values. That discrete mode will definitely be a much bigger help in supporting the potential for tornadoes across this region. So we will definitely watch these more discrete cells. Further down to the south, we may see it become a little bit more messy, but it could also be discrete, as you see that we do have a couple of pockets here that aren't necessarily in more of a messy mode. They are kind of messy. It may be more of a messy discrete mode along that cold front there, or sorry, that dry line. And that, but we'll definitely be able to support the potential of maybe a couple of tornadoes, some of which could definitely be strong across that region. Taking a look at our dew point values and how that will affect our instability across this region. Starting off with the region to the north here, where we are expected to see a very slim warm sector, but these supercells that are going to be in that warm sector could definitely be tornado producers. We could see some more moderate dew points, with dew points upwards of the mid 60s, the low 60s, which is definitely decent for instability. It's definitely not nothing, but we could definitely see some pretty strong instability come out of it depending on our temperatures. Further down to the south, we will see much better moisture, however, with dew points that could potentially get upwards of the low 70s, which will definitely provide an insane amount of instability across this region. We will definitely watch our temperatures to see how that will affect our instability, but with dew points that highs, we will definitely have some really strong K values to go with it. Taking a look at our temperatures and then how that will affect our instability across this region, we are expected to see some cooler temperatures because we did have kind of a little bit of cloud cover across this region, which kind of depended on our atmospheric recovery, and that may be why they're not issuing a 15% tornado risk just yet, because we do have a little bit of conditionality with atmospheric recovery. However, we do have a really large clearing, which is definitely helping with atmospheric recovery, and we do have a little bit lower temperatures across the region of concern. However, backing our storms, we will definitely see some pretty warm temperatures, upwards of the 80s, but in our warm sector, our temperatures may be as low as the upper 60s. However, regardless, our storms are expected to be in an environment that is going to lack cloud cover. Our clouds will probably be somewhere over here. We will see a little bit more cloud cover further down to the south. However, for the majority of the region of concern, we will definitely have a lack of cloud cover, and that will definitely allow for a large amount of instability across this region. And our storms are expected to fire while the sun is still high up in the sky, so we won't have any concern with our timing of our storms and how they'll progress through the night. Our storms will likely be nearing the end of their life cycle, or in the nearing the end of the enhanced risk region by the time the sun actually does completely set all the way and we lose our surface heating. So we definitely have a very large window of time that our storms could produce the potential of tornadoes. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that will affect our instability across this region, we are expected to see some pretty strong lapse rates across the northern enhanced risk region, with lapse rates that could potentially get upwards of 7 to 8, maybe the low to mid 8s, which will definitely be a major aid in our instability. And we should see our instability or our lapse rates that are going to continue to stay ahead of our storms, and that will definitely provide some pretty strong instability and definitely be a massive aid for our hail risk. And then further down to the south, we don't see as much lapse rates because we do have a thicker cloud cover, but we do have at least a little bit of lapse rates. It's definitely not nothing, and that will definitely help with instability quite a lot across this region, even when we do have cloud cover. Taking a look at our 700 millibar temperatures and how that will affect our convective inhibition, as well as our instability and our overall risk for severe thunderstorms. As of right now, the cap is already broken, which is kind of a given already because storms are ongoing and still need to fire later on around 6 to 7 p.m. In the northern enhanced risk region, and we will continue to see upscale growth from here, but the majority of it will be later on in the afternoon, but when the sun is still up. So the cap has already broken across this region, and storms are already ongoing, and we did have a cap that was in place earlier on today, which did lead to some massive instability building across this region, and we don't have a whole lot of 700 millibar warm air advection out of the south, so we don't have a thick elevated mixed layer that's currently in place. We probably do have at least a little bit of an elevated mixed layer in place. Probably did have one at least a little bit earlier, and that definitely probably aided in instability building across this region. However, because we don't have warm air advection out of the south, we won't have a whole lot that's going to really be impinging on our storms, and our elevated mixed layer shouldn't really be choking it off too much. Taking a look at our most unstable cape and how that will fuel our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. In the warm sector, that slim warm sector to the north, we will see some pretty decent cape values, upwards of 2,000, the mid 2,000s, which will definitely be sufficient to fuel the potential for significant tornadoes across that region. It's definitely not crazy strong, but further down to the south, we will see cape values that could potentially get upwards of the upper 3,000s, maybe some 4,000s. Our meso analysis was indicating upwards of 4,000 joules per kilogram of instability across the dry line region, which will definitely be able to aid in a tornado risk amongst our low-level jet. However, we may not really see too much storm development across the Oklahoma region, and then we also have a very large amount of instability that could potentially reach some widespread upper 2,000s in the low 3,000s as a result of the much stronger moisture across this region. But we do have a little bit more cloud cover and less surface heating and less lapse rates across this region that is leading to overall less instability than what it could be without it, but still, regardless, across this region we will see some really decent instability that will be more than enough to fuel the potential for significant tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our surface-based cape, I don't really have too much to say about this other than the fact that the majority of our most unstable cape is translating down to our surface, so we won't really have as much concern with our storms being surface-based, and our storms will definitely be surface-based amongst our very strong surface-based instability that translates down from our most unstable. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that will affect our risk for tornadoes and our severe thunderstorms across this region. As I previously mentioned, we have a very large amount of 0 to 3 kilometer instability in the warm sector region, with 0 to 3 kilometer values upwards of 200 and approaching 300 joules per kilogram of instability at our 0 to 3 kilometer across this region. That is insanely high, and with the directional shear that we will have across this region, there's no wonder why we have multiple tornado warnings across this region, because we will definitely see a very big hotspot for our cheat code with our surface vorticity and our 0 to 3 kilometer instability that will definitely be very supportive of the potential for multiple tornadoes across this region, some of which could definitely be strong, and we have 0 to 3 kilometer instability that is sufficient enough to make our storms tornado printers even later on in the afternoon. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that will indicate our tornado risk across this region. Again, we do have a really strong low-level jet and some really decent instability, and our energy helicity index values are expected to increase later on this afternoon as storms fire along the cold front a little bit more, extending down into Kansas here, with energy helicity index values upwards of 5 to 4, maybe reaching a 6 in some regions, especially at the updraft base of some of these supercells, but that's just a product of our convective allowing models and our models wanting to develop tornadoes on some of these storms, so that's why we have a little bit higher energy helicity index values in just some very small locations where our storms would be, but these are some really strong energy helicity index values that will be very indicative of the potential for multiple tornadoes across this region and potentially significant tornadoes as well. We could definitely see the potential for multiple significant tornadoes today. We already did see a massive wedge tornado in Nebraska. It was an absolute behemoth of a tornado in Nebraska today. A very large wedge as a result of strong instability, mainly 0 to 3 kilometer instability, and a very low condensation layer made for some massive tornadoes in Nebraska earlier today. And then further down to the south, On the topic of energy helicity index values, we have some really strong energy helicity index values further down to the south as well, with a small pocket where we have some much higher energy helicity index values. However, ahead of our storms, we definitely have a little bit lower energy helicity index values, but they are still really strong, upwards of 4 to 5, which will be very indicative and very supportive of the potential for multiple tornadoes across this region, some of which could definitely be strong. Taking a look at our SIGTOR parameter, I do look at this whenever we do have the potential for significant tornadoes, and woo, Zoomy Mama, do we have, sorry for saying that, but man, do we have some really strong SIGTOR values. Upwards of 2 to potentially 3 across a very widespread environment where we have multiple discrete supercells. We will definitely see the potential for multiple tornadoes and potentially strong tornadoes later on this afternoon when storms develop along the cold front further down into Kansas. And even as of right now, we could still see some significant tornadoes, and we already have seen significant tornadoes. Further down to the south in Texas, we will have some pretty strong SIGTOR parameter values as well, which will be supportive and indicative of the potential for massive, for significant tornadoes. Hold on. Sorry if my demeanor changes towards this section of the forecast. I just had to deal with a tornado emergency that impacted Omaha, western portions of Omaha, Nebraska. You can still see it on radar there. I will be releasing the live stream for you all to view as it happens, but please pray for the people in Omaha as of right now. That was not what I saw. It could have not gotten any more defined as far as tornado signature. There was literally no more that it could do to make itself prominent. Beware on an extremely deep debris ball and glitched out the correlation coefficient due to so much debris and how strong the tornado was. Literally nothing more you could do would make that tornado more defined. However, I do have to get a move on with this forecast so I can go live again. But taking a look at our damaging wind gusts, so we can get a feel for our risk for damaging wind gusts across the wind gust region. We do have a damaging wind gust risk upwards of, we do have a 15% damaging wind risk, where we could see the potential of some scattered damaging wind gusts, and that's definitely possible. Even outside of our storms, we could definitely see some widespread damaging wind gusts that could reach upwards of 50 to potentially 40 miles per hour across this region due to the low-level jet translating down to its surface. So that is causing some pretty widespread damaging wind gusts, and our storms could also potentially exhibit damaging wind gusts that may be able to reach upwards of 60 miles per hour, indicated by models here. So even if we don't see the potential for significant damaging wind gusts, which we may potentially, depending on what models want to indicate, I'm kind of actually surprised that this wasn't a hatched risk for damaging wind gusts, because of how our models are handling our damaging wind gusts with some more violent damaging wind gusts embedded in some of these storms. Taking a look at our large hail parameter on our meso analysis page and how that will indicate our hail risk. As of right now, we don't really have too much that's really indicating our hail risk, despite us having some pretty good, decent shear across this region. We do have some areas that are indicating upwards of 16 on our large hail parameter that are indicative of the potential for some large hail. However, we are definitely a little bit more on the lackluster side of things, but still indicating the potential for some large hailstones across this region. To close out, I'll roll our radar loop from the tornado emergency from Omaha in the background, because I kind of think it feels fitting for this type of situation right now. Again, if you know anyone that lives in Omaha as of right now, please make sure to check up on them. That was a very violent tornado, an extremely large and deadly tornado. And again, as I said previously, I've never seen a more defined tornado in my entire career. So if you live in the affected region, please make sure you're staying weather alert. For the love of God, make sure you're watching the weather. If you notice anything might have been wrong with this forecast, or you'd like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather, Weather Watcher, and JaxonWX, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys on the live stream.